All right. Did you make some friends? I am honestly, I have to say, I was right before this. I want to go to the symphony tomorrow, and it's at 7:30. We don't have an event. I was very excited, and I was like, "Who can I invite?" And I was like, "I have no one to invite. I have no friends." So I'm trying to make some new friends. So I made one Justin right there. So maybe we can go to the symphony together or something. And I feel like we all are feeling a little bit of a friend deficit right now. At least I am. So let's create some community, make some friends right here tonight. Without further ado, I want to bring up our two amazing panelists, Emilio Ruiz and Carly Schwartz, the editors of the San Francisco Examiner and Chronicle. Here to the baby stage. Welcome them. Amazing. Okay. So I have so many questions. So we're just going to try to get through a bunch of them. We're going to talk for like 30, 45. I'm going to try to keep it to that. Welcome Zoom as well. Everyone that's on the Zoom and the interwebs, welcome to you. Then we're going to get to audience questions. So we're going to try to keep a healthy amount of time for you all to ask the questions of these two amazing people. The first question is the most important question, okay? We are testing out this bird bath candle thing, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts. Is it are we a boot or a toot on this bird bath candle?
I think the candle should be a little bit bigger, and then like maybe a massive candle the size of the bird bath with multiple. Yeah.
Okay. Multiple. So okay, bigger, and then also remember to keep this the microphone right here.
Okay.
Yes, so the people in Dune can hear you. Okay, and then Emilio, what do you think?
I think the beer should be a chocolate fountain.
Okay.
So guests can easily just eat while they're talking.
All right. Well, just don't burden yourself because I don't want that story tonight of the two of you. You know, letting yourself.
You know, we write that. We co-write that
one. Ooh, I love it.
No one would care.
Oh my God! What do you mean? Don't say that.
We're the two least important people in our organization, pretty much. Who cares what happens?
What do you mean?
Oh, I think when you become an editor, you sort of take a vow that you're going to let the other people be the stars. You're going to be the star. That's what an editor does, right? You help other people become stars.
Yeah, the reason I was attracted. Whoa, too loud.
That's perfect.
The reason I was attracted to this role when I saw it listed was they described it as the key support role in the newsroom, and I love being behind the scenes, and that's why I'm on stage tonight.
I guess, I don't know if you all agree, but when I hear editor-in-chief, like I automatically think Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
In the Post.
It's a pretty gripping film.
Yes, but I think like the person on top, the person that's like sitting behind the desk with a cigar, like calling on the shots, saying, "No, we're not going to write that," or like, do it. Is that what it's like? I mean, what is your actual role in these papers?
It's all glamour.
It's so
glamorous. It's awesome.
It's a lot of video calls.
So I Zoomed today from 9 a.m. to 2:30 straight.
But that's just temporary, right? It's not going to be like when the paper's
going to end.
Yes, it's going to end.
When is it going to end, Manny?
It's going to end. I told my staff it's going to end completely when we're all back from Christmas break. So January 1, 2022.
Holding you to it.
No shot in hell.
Guys, have a little bit of faith.
And when it doesn't, I'm gonna be like, this is all Manny's fault. Give me that chocolate fountain.
That's fine. You can blame me for this. I want to hear your. So I want to spend a little bit of time on your personal stories, and then get into how you think about running your papers, and then I want to go big and go broad. Okay. Okay. What were your paths to editor-in-chief? I don't want like the full bio because you can read that online, but like, what do you think your path was, and what do you think your path was to this seat right now, this role right here? Okay. Go ahead.
I can pinpoint the exact moment, and I think because I'm a storyteller, I like to frame a narrative around my past. So this definitely didn't feel like a light bulb moment at the time, but looking back, this was the exact moment. I was running the HuffPost SF Bureau about 10 years ago, which was a small little scrappy operation, and went to an exhibition at the Legion of Honor about the history of the Hearst Corporation, which we learned earlier you're a big fan of studying the history of Hearst, and it's a really interesting.
Why are you telling all my secrets?
Just want to be your friend.
Oh,
Are you on Symphony?
We've already, I need that.
So I was at this exhibition and I was like sitting alone in the back of this theater watching a documentary about it. And I just had this moment where it just kind of hit me. I was like, I want to run a newspaper one day, and I want to run a newspaper in San Francisco one day, because I love the idea of kind of reviving this sort of old art that is less and less appreciated. And I love just sort of almost the preciousness of being in a newspaper newsroom. And I kind of thought, I could make my mark on the city by really reviving one of its kind of flagship papers. And it's so weird. I remember biking home that night in the rain. I don't know if it was raining, but I like to think it was raining. And I was like, this is my path. This is what I want to do. And it's crazy that I actually ended up here a decade later, because my way to get here was just so meandering and so roundabout. Like, I did not go work for a newspaper. I wound up at Google for 5 years, kind of way on the other side of things. I was traveling for a while, and for whatever reason, it just was the right place, right time. I was able to make good on that youthful dream.
Amazing, and here you are today. I can see you in the rain.
Still raining.
It's very Bridget Jones's Diary. Well, that was a compliment. Like, it was she get into.
Do you want to sit next to each other?
No, you're good.
I'm like the third guy on the date, and I'll go.
You can go to the symphony.
I'm sure you get a +2.
Yeah, you can go to the symphony. I've got
It's the
tickets
first
yet.
time in the symphony, so yeah, that'd be great.
Great. What about you? When was your moment?
A lot of people don't know this, but there's a lot of newsrooms in the country that are run by people who came up through sports, including your managing editor, now Sarah, she's here. And so what happened is in 1997, I'm sitting at my desk, 1997, God, I'm old, sitting at my desk in St. Paul, Minnesota as a sports editor of the paper there. And the guy walked up to me, one of my best writers, walked up to me and said, I'm leaving. I have a job offer to go work on the internet. And I was like, okay, what are they paying you? Because my best writer, I was going to match the offer. And he said, double what you're paying me. And then I said, so do you want a chocolate goodbye cake or a vanilla goodbye cake? And the negotiation. And so that was the moment in the late 90s when a lot of us, we were way ahead of the curve, because sports and business were the topics where the internet and news really took off. And so we knew right away there was this huge thing coming and we had to change. And from that moment on, I just became very digitally minded. And so I got caught up in, like a lot of us did, in this sort of vacuum that took a lot of us to running newsrooms when print publications had to make a giant transformation to digital. So first thing I did is leave sports and try to fix a local news section at the Washington Post when I was there. And then you sort of move up the chain that way. And then that event, without riding the bike in the rain, I got here.
We can fix that. We can do a whole
Yeah,
rain.
let's go for a bike ride after this.
In
I've
the
got plans.
rain. Oh, yeah.
You guys want to come?
I don't think they believe in our true friendship that's happening up here.
We'll have to prove them wrong.
Yes, we'll write an article about it. So I want to do a quick temperature check. Just like on how are your papers doing right now? Like, just between us, like, how are things? Like, what? No, I mean, really, like, what's, like, give me a temperature check. Like, how are we doing with, like, staffing and numbers, and like, just give. I think a lot of people maybe read the papers but would love to hear from you directly. Like, how would you say things are going for each of your papers respectively?
Well, I would say we're in a really interesting and really special moment, because we are a small local news outlet that's actually growing, that's not being eviscerated. We're under local ownership for the first time in a really long time, and he's super committed to growing our newsroom and to making the Examiner bigger and better. And so it's an interesting challenge to have resources, albeit limited, but resources to actually, strategically allocate towards growing. And we've shifted direction since I came on board about 6 months ago, and I think it's going pretty well. I mean, our paper has doubled in size. Our Sunday edition is bigger, and the pieces are longer and more thoughtful. And so, we still have a ways to go, especially in the digital side. That's going to be my next big push. But I'd say we're in a really unique position, and I'm excited about being on the precipice of sort of what will hopefully be explosive growth, because all of you are going to go read the Examiner after this, I'm sure.
So I'm a veteran of what we call the goodbye cake period in journalism, which was like 2008 to 2013. I was at the Post then. We had 990 people in the newsroom, and I was there as we dwindled down to 520. You can imagine what that was like as the business model fell apart, and we tried to sort of find our way. And by the time I left the Post, it was back at somewhere in the neighborhood of like 910 employees after Jeff came in and bought us. So the Chronicle already went through that period about 4 years ago. So it is now right-sized. We have a very successful business model. We will make tens of millions of dollars this year. We still need you to subscribe though and stop sharing passwords with people. I know you're all doing it. Stop clearing your cookies and all those other games you play.
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about.
We know exactly who you are. And so the industry now has set upon a new model. And unfortunately, many of you will think this, that the paywall is it for all of us. And I just got back from a conference in Spain where I did a whole thing on how you, the paywall model and how it would work. And so this is the future. Bezos used to say, yes, I know we gave away news once. It was a terrible mistake. We were very sorry, but now we have to charge you. And so nothing else will work. If you want news in your communities, you're gonna have to pay for it. And it's expensive to produce. And the hope that one day advertising or events or ballroom dancing lessons with your arts critic, we're going to pay the bills, it's just not going to work. And so now everybody in the country is embarked pretty much on a paywall approach. Still a few holdouts, the Yahoos and the BuzzFeeds and the HuffPosts are trying to make it without the paywall, but very few people have been able to have a substantial newsroom and still be able to pay the bills without one.
So you've teed me up very well for the question. I want to get into the finances of journalism, but Examiner doesn't have a paywall, right?
No, we don't have a paywall, but we're working on our business model. Yeah, we're ad supported at the moment, and as we grow, we're talking about the potential of creating a subscription model. There's a membership model in place right now.
But you have Clint, right?
We do have Clint.
And so in Atlantic has Loreen.
Atlantic has, yeah,
and
Clint
the
is our
Post had
Loreen.
Jeff, and there should be like a color war where everyone, dresses in their. Don't do that.
I'd love to see Clint and Loreen and Jeff in a room together, kind of.
But I guess the point of the
Yeah,
question is
talk
like,
about the
is
news.
it paywall or high net worth individual bankrolls?
I mean, I'm with Emilio that I do think subscriptions are the future. I think there are different ways to do it. I think Google's doing a lot of really interesting things in this space with subscription partnerships, with newsrooms all over the world, and there is a lot of revenue to be had from that. But I think there are other interesting ways of looking at it as well. Events was one thing you mentioned that we're really excited about trying out more of this year, and there's still money in print advertising, believe it or not, especially in the luxury space.
And be clear about one thing, the Washington Post makes money, lots of money. So Jeff isn't bankrolling anything. He's making money. John Henry, who owns the Boston Globe, and he owns the Red Sox and Liverpool, I think. He makes money at the Globe. The Star Tribune, owned by a millionaire in Minneapolis, they make money. So things have turned now where newsrooms are right-sized, and digital revenue is catching up, and people are beginning to make money. Now, are they making money hand over fist? No, they don't need to, but they certainly were there for the difficult transition period. The paper to watch with great interest is the LA Times, and they're millionaire. They have not figured out their business model, and they're still struggling to come up with a profitable way of doing it with a newsroom. I have 170 people in my newsroom. The Times is trying to do it with 600 or 500 and change. Hard to do a newsroom that big. So we'll see how they work their way through it.
I guess that gets to my question of whether or not you both think a newspaper or a source of journalism and news should have to make it work financially in order to serve its purpose. Because a lot of these institutions that are gone because they could not make it financially, but they serve a very important purpose for their communities. So on one hand, I'm glad that there seems to be some papers left that now have found a way to make it work through whether it's a combination of subscription and ads and wealthy individuals, but it does make me wonder, is that should that be the case? Should you have to take in millions of dollars in order to serve this purpose, or should there be another way?
I mean, it's basic economics. You pay for talent, and talent costs money. I think the nonprofit model is really interesting. A lot of newsrooms are going the way of nonprofit. The Texas Tribune's a good example of that. They're 10 years in and they're doing extraordinarily well with a nonprofit model. Oakland side, Berkeley side, across the Bay are nonprofit. But I mean, you need money to run a business. So how that money comes in, we have to do it in a number of creative ways.
Catherine Weymouth, who was publisher of the Post right before they gave up and sold, used to say that we have a nonprofit model. I just haven't filed the paperwork yet. That's always fun. Where it's really difficult, where you really worry is that not so much a regional with the city, with the wealth of San Francisco, but you worry about smaller communities where there isn't really a business model and they haven't been able to find any traction in the local news community. But local news is really, really hard. It is just it's a grind. It's very difficult to keep you all's attention for more than like 2.5 damn minutes. I told our editors today that we were going to go with a life-threatening mist as our main theme on the homepage. Because when it rains, the streets get wet, cars crash. You all are so pathetic in the rain, really. I'm just trying some snow sometime. Anyway, and so in sort of mid-level cities and below, that's where the real danger is. And there are a lot of bad actors trying to fill that space with non-news that it's pretty terrifying.
What do you all think about the idea of there being some kind of tax that then pays for local or regional journalism?
So there's a bill now that is working its way through Congress, where for the first time there would be government support of the media, of local news media. It's really controversial because how can you cover the government with one hand while you're taking money from the government with the other? It's close to passing. I'm not a big fan, but if it's used to give tax breaks to publishers in cities where it's really tough to make a go of it, I'm less against it. And those people really aren't covering the federal government anyway. But that movement is finally taking root, and it could happen as soon as this year.
Yeah, that sounds a little dangerous to me. It sounds like a slippery slope. But if you think about it, I mean, every human being has interests. So the funders of our papers are human beings with biases and interests, and the boards of nonprofits are human beings with biases and interests, which gets you down the rabbit hole of objectivity to begin with. But the idea of having government subsidized news kind of makes me think of China. And there's a little bit of that dark mist that you mentioned on your homepage when I think about government funded news.
Yeah, I mean, we had a big argument about this before within the staff about whether or not this would be a conflict of interest, or if you could find a way to get money from the people directly to the newspapers that wasn't a paywall but didn't go through the government. And it's tough. I'm less worried about places like San Francisco, more worried about other areas that have lost their papers.
And there's also the Patreon Substack model where consumers are buying news directly from the source, from people being the purveyors of the storytelling, and that kind of gives you agency to kind of cherry pick who you want to read, and that's going directly into the hands of the journalists themselves. So that's a whole other thing we could talk about at some point tonight if you're keen on it.
Let's do it. Before we get to that though, I want to ask you about priorities. So how do you think about when you, instruct your newsroom, if you do that, on how much you prioritize kind of national issues versus local versus international, and how do you make those calls?
Sure, it's real simple. There's a great place to get a comprehensive information about the world. It's called Google, and we can't be Google, and so we have to pick our spots. And it's pretty clear that our spot is going to be in regional space. There's huge crossover with the Post and the Times in San Francisco. I think for the Post, San Francisco is number 2 in terms of other cities. For the Times, I think it's 3. So we get it. A lot of people are reading the national and international news there. We're not going there, but so we have to cover the hell out of the Bay Area. And so that's what we do. We focus on that. There was a time when, the Chronicle and the Examiner wanted to bring to San Francisco the news of the world, and they had foreign bureaus all over the place, and that model proved disastrous. It won't work. And so we're solely focused locally, and then the decision comes on, even locally, what are you going to cover locally? What are the issues? Because you can't even cover all the issues locally. And so then you have to pick through there.
Yeah, I think the Chronicle does incredible regional coverage. By the way, I get a lot of my regional news from reading the Chronicle every morning. With the Examiner, we're a much more of a shoestring, smaller staff, and so we've made the decision to go hyperlocal and just focus on pretty much San Francisco within the borders of the city, the 7x7, and then a little bit into the peninsula, because we do have distribution down in the peninsula, but we don't distribute in the East Bay, so we're not even really covering what's going on in Oakland, or sometimes we do wider Bay Area trends, even wider national trends if they're rooted in San Francisco. Like if there's a startup, we did a piece today on a startup that's aiming to get people off their phones and into the world, and that's got a national presence, but it's based in San Francisco with San Francisco founders and a very strong hook to the San Francisco community.
So no plans for world domination quite yet.
Never.
Do
There's
people,
no model for it.
just a quick straw poll, do people want San Francisco to have a New York Times where like people go to us to look for world news, or are people cool with just having really high quality local papers? Okay, all right, yeah, cool, yeah, love it.
Let's do it.
Great, let's do it.
Let's do it.
What do you need from each other? I mean, why is it important for you that there be a strong, bullish San Francisco Examiner, and why do you need, a San Francisco Chronicle to be excellent?
I mean, I just think the more voices in the city, the better. I think the city is ripe for 2, if not more, major newspapers. And the Examiner is in a bit of a renaissance period where we're growing basically from really just a tiny spot on the news sort of landscape. And so as we grow, we have to kind of really figure out strategically, what are we going to do differently from the Chronicle? How do we carve out a niche for ourselves in the city and provide something that really give consumers an option to sort of cherry pick. But I just think the more perspectives, the more things that are being experimented with, the more we can learn from each other. I learn so much from the Chronicle every day, and I think it's really cool. I mean, there are just a plethora of local blogs that are really great to read. Mission Local is doing incredible stuff in this neighborhood, and I think the more voices and perspectives in the city, the better. I'd like to think there's really room for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, you all are served by an amazing news ecosystem. It's got to be one of the best in the world, because you look at some of the great local. It's sort of silly for us to be up here talking about the future of journalism in San Francisco. You could have 20 people up here from all the other different publications that do great work, from KQED, the local television stations, the people at Mission Local, and there's a lot of great work being done. And what I like about it is the competition. I thrive on competition. I want to win. I want to beat people on stories. It makes me crazy when they beat us or somebody else beats us on a story. And we make each other better by pushing each other. And we also do a better job by having a broad expanse of publishers. You do a better job of holding everybody accountable. There's a lot of things wrong with the Bay Area. And so the more the merrier when it comes to doing accountability work and uncovering some of that stuff.
Maybe I'm just kind of spoiled. I think maybe I am, because I'm like, only 2 big papers, come on, like there should be more. But I guess you're right, it is a relatively small city on the grand scheme of things. And we have a bunch of kind of online blogs that are really awesome. And there are a bunch of cool local rags that people do read. So maybe I just need to.
You need to read more news, Manny.
No, I read a lot of news. Every day I go to the Chronicle, New York Times, Politico, Examiner, Mission Local, Queer Tea, which is a news outlet, okay, for my people, and The Hill. And that's where and I just keep surfing between those all the time. I want to quickly touch on diversity in the newsroom, because people are talking about it a lot. It's super important. How are you both trying to make sure that your newsroom reflects the diversity of our country and the city?
Well, I I came in and within a month changed the structure of the Chronicle. Not because I inherited a group, I inherited a really talented group, just so happens that the entire group was white men. And so what we did is we flattened our structure. We have 8 directors now. And we are, I feel very good about our representation. The other thing is that you always have to remember about diversity is that, I went to my first diversity crisis meeting in journalism in like 1991. It's been something we've been talking about forever and we suck at. And so the only way really to fix it, the first thing is to hold yourself accountable to the numbers, make sure you're where you should be. But the numbers don't really mean anything, right? You have to listen to the voices of the diverse people in your room. You can have a real diverse newsroom and not listen to anybody and it doesn't work. And so it has been really interesting. There's a movement of young journalists now who are very different from my generation, who really want to be heard and want to be in all the conversations, and we welcome that. And so we want to have those conversations and we want the diversity of voices. I think it makes us better. There's a lot of issues in San Francisco right now where it's very easy to fall into a trap of taking one side. And so to keep that balance, we have to check ourselves. We need people to say to us, hey, Walgreens put out a press release that says they're closing 5 stores because of X. Why are we believing them? And we need to push and try to find out what the truth is. And so those are the voices that truly make it work. And having that diversity and employing it is what's the key.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I think diversity of perspective is so important, and we're in a unique position where we're hiring up right now. I came in, I inherited a staff of 4 reporters to give you a sense of the numbers we're working with, and we've managed to double that, over the past 6 months. But each hire is so important and so valuable, and so just getting out there into the different communities that the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists, Hispanic journalists, getting our name out there, really trying to sell this talent on our vision and where we hope to go, getting out into the communities directly, making connections with people. And then I think what Emilio said about just bringing all voices within the newsroom to the table. I try to have coffees, lunches with every reporter, kind of one-on-one, and just solicit as much feedback as possible. I think, taking feedback, whether it's hard to hear or relevant or worthwhile, it's always a good experience.
Thank you. Super important, super necessary. I'm glad to hear that you're both, it's very front of mind for both of you. Well, I want you to allow me to get philosophical for a second. In preparing for this, I read about this transition in journalism from a descriptive to interpretive, kind of around the late 60s, with McCarthyism, Pentagon Papers, all that stuff, and how there was this kind of MO of, before that time, newspapers were more descriptive than anything. They described what was happening, maybe with the exception of yellow journalism, and then you get to this place where it's much more common to have journalists just interpret what happens, and that's kind of what you read. I feel like we've gotten to this place now in 2021 where it's at such an extreme, where you pick your side and that is what you read. That's the paper that you read or the outlet that you listen to. I mean, I guess some people will listen to Fox News once in a while to see what the other side is saying, but we've kind of found our boxes and we're sitting in it. I want to ask you if you think that's right, if you agree with that kind of analysis of where we are. We've gotten to this place where every paper has its perspective that it's quietly pushing. And even if you disagree with me, I'm going to disagree with you and say that is where we are. And ask you if you actually think we could even get back to a place where the newspaper just reported the news and didn't have its own interpretation or bent.
Good question. I mean, in San Francisco, it's like Fox News if you're center left, and it's the battle between who's more progressive than the progressive. So I don't see that polarization locally, but absolutely. In the national news, I've been hate watching Fox News since I was, interested in the news in my late teens. And yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, but I also just think I think humans are inherently biased, and cultivating those diverse perspectives and labeling them as such, this is a perspective, this is not us reporting the news straight. I mean, that's one of the goals with the new Examiner, is to just bring in as many outside voices as possible, and publish a cross section of perspectives so that maybe you have a progressive and a center left person on opposite pages, coming at homelessness from different perspectives. Does that answer your question? I feel like I veered a little bit.
Yeah, it answers the first part of it, but maybe I'll let you answer that first part too. And then I want to ask you, then I want to get to the second part, which is, if we've gotten to this place, would it even make sense or work to go back in today's day and age? I want to basically, are we just going to keep going down this road is I guess what I'm wondering. But what do you think about the first part? Do you think we've gotten to this place?
First of all, I think you have to remember that the world right now is facing an unbelievably well-funded, really smart, aggressive, moralless propaganda campaign under the sort of the moniker of fake news. And it's not just in the United States. Maria Ressa won the Pulitzer Prize, won the Nobel last week. She's this unbelievable. If you don't know about her, take 5 minutes, read about her. She's a newspaper publisher in the Philippines who is up against the guy who makes Donald Trump, look like Che Guevara, basically. And she's on the brink of going to prison. And the reason she's not, part of the reason I think they gave her the Nobel is in the hopes that she doesn't go to prison. Unbelievable hero. And so in the United States, you have a really well-funded, just read through the Wall Street Journal's reporting on Facebook, right? It's a very well-funded, very smart approach attempting to, no other way to put it, inculcate a certain group of the population into believing things that aren't true. And so as the media, our job becomes really difficult, right? Because we go and we get the facts and people will tell you, well, that's not true. And then they'll follow that Joseph Goebbels model of if you repeat a lie enough times, it becomes a truth, and they'll just keep repeating the lie. And it's working really, really well. And so our job as publisher, as the harbinger of facts, is to attack that with facts. And it's really very difficult. And so where we are is often, you look at it as a polarization. I look at it as something completely different. I look at it as almost as the people who have been lost and the people who are still thinking straight. And so we have to do our best to get these people to come back over here, right? What happened on January 6th was an insurrection. They attempted to overthrow the government. We now have elected officials saying that, it was just like any other day on the Capitol. And so this is a real crisis in this country. And if it goes the wrong way, we will lose democracy. There is just no doubt. And so stop worrying about, there being a middle and a non-middle. Start thinking about there is a group of people who are North Korea in the United States who are doing everything that they're now being programmed a certain way, and then there's everybody else. And that's what we're up against. And so our job is to fight that and to fight that with the truth, with all the tools we have. And if we don't get smarter about it, we are going to lose. And you're going to find out in exactly 3 years whether or not we've lost it. I just put a damper on the whole evening. Let's go back to talking about the chocolate fountain.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing you properly, because you are the editor of the Chronicle here, and I'm listening to you. That's what I'm doing. I'm actively listening to you, taking it all in. And I think what I took from that was we need to beat them at their own game. Like, we have to be just as, because there's this army of people utilizing, what's the word? Algorithms and lies and stuff to convince people of things. You have to be clicky, and you have to be, you have to get people's attention and bring them over to truth. Is that what you're saying?
Not clicky. We have to make sure that wherever there's a lie, there's a truth. So if they are gaming Facebook to make sure that 1.5 million people today see a story that's a lie, we have to get our stuff in front of 1.5 million people as well.
Okay, so
on both sides.
I hear that, but so would you say though that the San Francisco Chronicle doesn't have a certain bent to how it reports on local politicians that is different than how different than how the Examiner wants to, or some other local publication?
Different issue, right? I mean, I think there is when you make a decision about a story, right? How am I gonna rate this story about Chase Boudin? You whatever your personal training has taught you will lead you to make a decision that some will interpret as being, left, right, or center. You're always gonna have some of that. Your job, though, is to keep bringing yourself back to the middle to a point. The big crisis in journalism has been that we now face an army of people who have no problem whatsoever lying. And so what used to be getting both sides of the story now means getting the truth and then getting a bunch of lies. And they will stick to those lies. So what do we do about the lies? Do we print the lies? And if you print the lies, you are balanced, but you are printing a lie. And the industry right now is trying to figure that out. What do we do about the lies? What do we do when a member of the Senate stands up and says something that is completely untrue? The great thing to study is this notion of fact checkers. We all thought that if we armed ourselves with fact checkers in journalism, we could stop this. And what wound up happening is that what those folks did is they made their folks believe that, well, fact checkers are really just fake news people who are lying to you as well. And so that was a great weapon that they neutralized.
This is crazy because I feel like this is all happening kind of like in real time. Like this was not a thing so long ago, right? Like it's all changing right before our eyes, and it's almost hard to keep up.
Yeah, I think nobody knows the answer. I mean, it's very Pollyanna to think like we're gonna print truths to counter the lies and change the lying liars' opinions. I mean, maybe I don't have the solution for it, but maybe it goes beyond words. I mean, we talk a lot in our newsroom about bringing people out into the community and kind of taking our journalism off the page and into the field. So galvanizing in a way that creates human connection. I mean, the only way to get across to anyone is to form a relationship with them, form a connection with them. So is it just a very slow process of community building and kind of taking away these people's religions and beliefs through showing them? I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking in real time now.
And you're thinking about that as the role of the outlet, perhaps.
I mean, perhaps we talk a lot about what does it look like if we organize events around the stories that we're telling and bring people together, kind of like what you're doing, and
I was gonna say.
and introduce each other at the beginning of
Sounds like
the
a great
talk,
idea, Carly. We're gonna call it Carly's.
Maybe. Do you want to come? Can I interview you?
I would be curious to ask you all, how many of you know somebody who's gone to that side? And all right, keep your hands up. And how many of you have successfully brought them back?
Oh.
Well, that's every day if you work at the New York Times or the Washington Post, right? Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And so if you're at a national outlet, you are dealing with people who are sending you links that are, why aren't you covering this? You click on the link and it's, Bob's website and it's clearly fake and there's 9 typos in the 3rd paragraph and I gotta argue this, right?
Yeah. I just have like 1 or 2 more questions, then I want to get to the audience. This whole notion now that Biden is bad for business. See that alliteration I did there? That for the whole news and journal, like people aren't paying attention as much, sounds exciting. People aren't as interested in reading the paper because Trump was newsy, Biden isn't. Is that true, and does it matter?
100% true.
Yeah, you're still gonna make tens of millions of dollars next year.
I don't cover national politics, right?
I see.
So the audience of the Post and the Times is down 30% this year. And that's a loss of revenue. There's no way around it. Now, the big difference again with digital subscriptions is as long as people don't drop their subscriptions, then it's okay. But the Post, I know the Post has seen, I might talk about Times, but I know the Post has seen a drop in subscribers who are now bored. People forget the 4 most difficult years I had in digital was the last 4 years of Obama. That man was the most boring president in the history of presidents. Everybody loved him. There was, everybody respected him, but the man just could not do anything to move the needle. And we are now in a very, and how many of you are breathlessly following the budget debate happening on Capitol Hill right now? Because that's the only thing happening, right? And
Some
so,
people, but not a ton.
right, and so, yeah, it's bad for business. There's no, and don't lie about it, it's true. The man is very good at what he does.
But would you say it's also good for business because there's less vitriol coming out from the other side?
That's people saying that you're an enemy of the state and you should be like, reporters like fearing for their lives.
People forget, Fox News is much better off with a Democrat in the White House than a Republican in the White House. That's how you make your money. You make your money because there's an angry group that is out of power, that is unhappy that they're out of power.
And they're watching your station or reading your newspaper, is that what it is?
And you're watching Fox News.
So you're saying our side, and I will admit that I am very much a Democrat here. We're not paying attention as much because our side is in power. We're just kind of hoping they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you're also gonna be very forgiving.
Which is worrying because things are on the precipice of not getting done. And so we definitely need to stay. We all need to be following these budget negotiations because they're super fucking important. How can people support local journalism? That's my second last question. How can people support? So everyone should subscribe to the Chronicle, and everyone should.
You know what I think people should do is I think they should read more local news. How many of you, for
And subscribe
example,
to the Chronicle.
and
I
subscribe.
said that already, Emilio.
But I think when you read more local news, you talk to your friends and community members about what you're reading, and then you get them engaged in local issues. Like we were talking about Mohammed Nuru today, and I kind of brought up, I don't think 1 out of maybe 1 in 2 in 50 of my friends would even know who that is. Major story in San Francisco, and I think if more people were just reading beyond the headlines and engaging in local issues and discussing them with each other, then they would be more curious to kind of pick up the paper when they walk past it, subscribe to the Chronicle, find out the backstory. And the more people talking about local issues, especially in our demographic, the more engaged we are as a community. So just read. That's how you can support local
Read
news.
the local newspapers, y'all. And last question is, I want to ask you all, each of you, to ask the other person, the question you've been waiting to ask each other, whatever that question is.
What investigative stories are you working on right now?
How much do you pay your reporters?
Oh my God! I would say both of you and open it up to audience Q&A. Let's go right here in the front. And we are almost getting our wireless mics back on track. Ram? November 7th, we're gonna have our wireless mics back. Until then, please say the question. I'll repeat it for the audience so everyone can hear.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. To be transparent, I am a reporter on the local, so thanks for the shout out. But I'm gonna ask not from the publication, but as an individual, because I think a lot about media and we obviously also haven't got everything right. I think that's something all companies have to go through. But I kind of have a 2-pronged question. First, being from the Bay, I think you guys probably know there's a lot of monolingual speakers, especially with Asian languages. I think is very underrepresented. Also, we have struggled, covering that as well, and that's something we're thinking about. But also Spanish monolingual speakers, and I'm just curious if when you're thinking about diversity, do you also think about the skills of language when you're hiring people? Because I think also obviously race and ethnicity is one thing, but then also being able to talk to these communities that maybe are spoken for by community groups, as well-meaning as they are, isn't exactly the same as asking these people individually. And then I think secondly, the Walgreens piece was amazing, obviously. And I think maybe when you're thinking about bigger news media, like the New York Times, for example, I think there are criticisms that happen with that is one reporter will report something and then another reporter will have a story about the same topic that exposes maybe these lies or these half-baked facts. And I totally understand when a story is breaking, you don't have all the facts and you can't immediately call out the lies, and you have to say, well, this is what the police said, and that's just what you have at that time. I totally understand that, and we struggle with that too. But I guess thinking as a consumer, and when you have these fair criticisms about how can we trust you if you have alternative stories from the same publication that is a brand. Like, I'm just curious as how you guys are thinking about that. So I also think about that as like a reporter.
Did you all hear the question? Questions? Yes, so I'm not gonna repeat them.
Sorry.
No. Thank the Lord, because I couldn't do that justice probably. And you heard it. So we had a reporter from Mission Local speaking in personal capacity. Go ahead.
Yeah, those are two really great questions. I think in terms of diversity of language, absolutely, it's so important. I mean, you think about the Asian population in San Francisco is, I think, it's as large as 30%, and the Chinese language newspaper is huge. So one thing I've been thinking about is how to form partnerships with local publications in other languages. El Tecolote is a big example. We just did a beautiful profile on their executive director. And how cool would it be if we could translate those articles and then syndicate them in the Examiner? Because we are an English language newspaper, and we certainly don't have the resources to print in other languages at the moment. I was reading a California-based publication that does offer Spanish language recently. I think it was Cal Matters, and they do a really beautiful job of printing their articles in Spanish and English. But I think the more we can, again, bring that diversity of perspective through potential partnerships, syndication, doing it in a more sort of scrappy way, and absolutely that includes hiring reporters that have the language skills to really get out into the community. We just made one of our beats for one of our reporters a communities beat, where we're gonna have, she's actually here tonight, and we're gonna have her just in the neighborhoods directly engaging with the residents. And so I hope that she's willing to learn 5 new languages. I'll talk to her after the talk. But yeah, it's so important. And as to your second question, I think the Examiner is, we have a newsroom of 20, the Chronicle has a newsroom of 170. So we have to be really strategic the way we think about breaking news anyway. And we recently made a very deliberate pivot away from covering breaking news. We don't want to be the first one on the scene of like a car accident or at a press conference, kind of transcribing what's happening in real time and getting it on the internet, because then that's all we would do. We would only have and we probably wouldn't even win. So we're thinking more along the lines of kind of day 2 thoughtful analysis and what we call thought scoops. So really digging into the information that's already there and forming kind of an educated and nuanced and different opinion about that, or different angle about that, and kind of coming at storytelling that way, because that's really how you have to do it when you have, a smaller staff and limited resources. So I don't think that particular problem applies to us as much, because we are really waiting for the facts to come in before we come at it with that sort of what we call the day 2 angle. Thanks for your questions, those are great.
Yeah, I mean, I just say writing the first draft of history is a bitch. It's just really hard. And one of the things I think publishers are struggling with all over the country is what to do about a police report. A police report used to be the fundamental thing every news reporter used to tell what happened. And so now there's growing evidence that we can't trust some police reports. So then what the hell do you do? Right? You weren't there, you have to recreate the scene. That could take days. And in the meantime, there's plenty of other outlets that are going to really quickly just report what the police says. And so we're trying to figure that out. I don't really have that answer. I don't know. In some cases, we do try to slow down, and we'll let some things go by that we otherwise would have jumped on. But look at what, Chase Center, the Fish concert 2 nights ago, 2 people are dead. So what happened? And so the police have come out and said, well, the guy jumped. Okay, we got a video, what can you show me? Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have all written, the guy jumped, no question. Now we write, the guy jumped, police said, but we could not, but the Chronicle could not independently ascertain that fact, blah, 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 because we're not sure anymore. And so now we have people trying to figure out, every publication in town today was trying to talk to people at the concert. What did you see? Did you see him jump and that sort of thing? So yeah, it's created a real quandary in terms of, but overall though, having seen what we've seen in some police reports, it's absolutely the right thing to do.
All right, on this side, go ahead. We'll get you next.
Hi, I'm just wondering, are both of your papers respectively surveying your audiences to see what stories resonate with them? And if so, I'd love to hear what are maybe the top 2 things that people are interested in reading?
Yeah, the question was, are both your papers surveying your audiences to see what they're interested in reading? And if so, what are you learning?
You know, we don't have to survey. We have these, we know what everybody reads. And I can sum it up for you in one word: burritos. You know, they're
I loved your, yeah, that burrito package. For you.
you know, the audience in San Francisco is a really interesting group. Food and wine is massive here. There's great interest in restaurants and sort of wine-related utility stuff. There's also great interest in really granular issues that affect, you know, as we all know, that San Francisco School Board has been a tad bit controversial. And so that is an issue. But there isn't a sweeping, you know, we can't do what the Times and the Post can do, which is Trump, right? We will write 700 things on Trump and we'll get 10 million people a day. We have to sort of find what resonates, and it shifts from day to day. And it's not a very big audience unless you write about burritos. So it's hard. It's just really hard.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing a lot of community research. Again, we're still very much in ramp up mode, but I've talked to someone who actually, this is a really cool career field. He specializes in community engagement as it relates to journalism. So what do folks in the community actually want to read about and talk about? And we're talking with him about what kind of a listening program might look like. We've discussed various surveys. We read Google Analytics very carefully, obviously, as I'm sure the Chronicle team does as well. And I would say it's hard to pinpoint a pattern of what folks really want to read about. You know, there's always like the gruesome crime story, but we're kind of veering away from that kind of coverage. But one story in particular that sticks out that did really well was a piece that we had that set off a bunch of follow-up coverage from other outlets about how the taxi industry is actually seeing an upswing because Uber and Lyft were surge pricing for a while. So I think what I can glean from that and sort of similar stories is that people want to read about stuff that directly affects their day-to-day lives and how they kind of move through the city and how they experience the city. So, you know, whether or not you want to read about Mohammed Nuru, like how does that affect you and your life in San Francisco? How do you write that compelling headline that makes you want to read further because it does impact your life directly? And people are inherently narcissists, right? Like they want to know how it relates to their own lives. So that's probably one through line I can identify.
All right, you're next here in the front row over here.
Hi, I had a similar question actually about languages in different communities. I was in Chinatown the other day and I remember just being really struck by seeing a local bilingual paper that was kind of small. Every story had the same byline and that person was also the publisher and the editor. And so when it comes to like all the different communities in San Francisco where their first port of call for news might not be the Chronicle or the Examiner, but more fully resourced or smaller papers, like is the goal for your papers to become as welcoming and trustworthy to those communities as their smaller local papers? And if so, like, how do you get there? Is that even feasible? Is it about uplifting the Chronicle or the Examiner's own coverage, or like you said, syndication, partnering with them?
If anybody can answer that question, I'd love to know the answer. Because that's like the $1 million question, right? So we've done a shitty job historically of covering those communities. We lost those communities decades ago. And so how do you even get them to trust you? Forget about read you, trust you. And so we're working on that. We have some ideas for some different community outreach things we're planning. But it really involves starting with the admission that we didn't do a very good job. And some of it starts with, we're sorry. If you go back into the bound volumes of the Chronicle, way back, we'd be horrified at what the papers were writing about the Chinese community in San Francisco. Horrified. And so now I'm going to show up and I'm going to get them to trust me. No chance, right? And so we need to figure that out. We need to do a better job just so we can have a conversation. And if I can get to the point of having a conversation about them, then 2-3 years down the road, maybe I can get them to trust me. And 2-3 years down the road, maybe I can get them to read. But right now, I'm nowhere. All right.
I would say the Examiners, and then I'll just echo that, and absolutely the apologies, the community outreach. We're in a really unique position because we are a free newspaper, so I think we do have the ability to reach maybe communities who can't necessarily pay for their news. And again, I think that kind of partnership ground level could work well alongside a syndication sort of strategy. And we did partnerships really well back when I was at HuffPost. I'm kind of trying to see where I can replicate that at the Examiner.
Okay, let's try to get a couple more questions in. There was a question behind you. Yes, you, and then right in front of you, and then, okay, we're gonna try to get a few more in. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of go back to the question prior to this last one about how you're engaging a lot of readers. And I mean, something that strikes me initially is just like burritos being kind of like restaurants and wine for the audience that you're going after. Is like, you know, those obviously aren't hard-hitting issues. Really affecting the consumer. So the creative strategies around bringing it away from that, yeah. So what are these creative strategies that kind of papers kind of build burritos and wine? You know, it's the same as what like a rich city. People moving here have experienced that, but there's a lot of really problematic issues. How do you bring people's attention to that?
Okay, don't answer that yet. I want me to take your question next, and then I'll answer both of them. Go ahead.
Okay, mine's very different, which would be,
A challenge.
okay, let's try to remember everything here. So I just wanted to ask about the Alden Global Capital controversy, where they're like starving out these papers around the nation, and like, what keeps San Francisco safe from that, or other risks that come to mind around that story?
So the first question was about kind of how do you get people to care about things other than burritos and food and wine? What creative strategies do you have to do that? To get to click on the more hard-hitting issues? And then you fear this global capital starving out of papers? What is that?
I'll take that.
Okay. And maybe we'll get one more question, then we're gonna close her up.
So we'll do yours first. You're not immune to it. Alden Capital owns the East Bay Times and something else around here, so they're starving. So the plan is real simple. If your newsroom is small enough, you will make money publishing a newspaper. So this vulture fund came in and did what vultures funds do. Vulture company did, which is you buy companies that are in distress and you just milk them down to zero, right? So you just keep cutting the costs and keeping the profit as high as you can. So every year you chop 10 people out of the newsroom. Every year you make $40 million, and you just keep chopping. If you look at the San Jose Mercury News and what it used to be and what it is now, my wife used to work there. Sweet God, I mean, it's just not. And so they're doing that around the country. They just bought Tribune. They're doing it now to the Chicago Tribune. There was a massive piece that you read, I'm sure, that was in Vanity Fair or something like that. The Atlantic, yeah, you can read it. It's your genuine capitalism horror story. And what keeps it not happening here is to have either a vibrant community leader like Clint or a company like Hearst that has been in San Francisco for, good God, a very long time. But every market in the country is susceptible to it, and it works. They make a lot of money, and they are single-handedly killing journalism.
We just need more passionate, rich local people who want to buy up their local newspapers and inject money into growing them. So if you know any in every city around the country, buy them back.
They should not go into small business if they want to get to that point.
Correct.
Just FYI.
Real estate's good.
And then on the other question of how do you get what we call, readers to eat their vegetables, right? How do you get readers interested in things that are important? One of the great mystifying coverage areas for me that I've never been able to crack is state government coverage. I've led state government coverage in Maryland, Virginia, and now in California. And you just cannot get people to pay attention to what is some of the most important stuff that's affecting their lives. And so how do you do that? I have no idea. I have tried everything. And I don't know what, other than, Gavin Newsom having dinner at the French Laundry, as a hook in, it's very hard. I do know that burritos, if I can get them onto my site, my site, if I can get them on my homepage, all that stuff is on my homepage. If I can get them to subscribe, if I get them to subscribe to burritos, the path in for a subscriber is usually the homepage. And so then maybe they'll experience some of that. You're absolutely right. Why does TV news, for the most part, that whole thing, if it leads, it leads. Why do they do that? Because they know what their audience will stay with. And if they led with the latest from the state capitol, people would change the channel. And so it's really hard. And so how do you keep the next 3 years, the United States populace interested in Joe Biden when he's doing a bunch of boring stuff? How do you do that? While on the other hand, you've got a carnival barker and an entire show on this other side that's much more interesting. And if you can answer that question, you could be a very rich person, because it goes to human nature, and it's really tough. How do I make what happened in Sacramento directly related to your life so you will be passionate about it?
Why don't we have this be the last question? I think you had a question. Did you have anything to add before we go?
I mean, I have a whole host of like recirculation tactics that I'll share with you after this event.
There'll be
You
some
know,
time.
you know my phone number.
There'll be some time after this to ask them directly. Go ahead.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of news happening in San Francisco. You're both working with limited staffs of different sizes. I'm interested in what you feel like your largest coverage gaps are and how you plan to address those in your new 10 years as editor-in-chief.
Did anyone hear that? No. What would you say is your largest coverage gaps, and how do you plan to fill those gaps in your 10 years as editors-in-chiefs? Did I get that right? Okay.
Yeah, well, speaking of something Emilio just said nobody's interested in, we're really interested in cracking the code on City Hall. And I think that's going to be the next area we really focus on. How do we get San Franciscans to care about what's happening locally, governmentally, politically? And yeah, that's just my quick answer there is expect more of that in the Examiner.
So the Chinese community in San Francisco, and the way to crack that is to hire a reporter who can speak that language and get into that. And it's not one language, it's a couple. Same thing with the Japanese community. It's a huge Filipino community. Who knew there were so many Afghanis in the Bay Area? I didn't know that until recently. So finding our way into those communities, I think, is our big priority. And the only way to do it is to hire people who speak the language. It's just not going to work otherwise.
Okay, let's give a round of applause to our two editors-in-chief. We're gonna do a quick little closing. And then we're all gonna go home. I go to sleep early, so it's already like getting close past my bedtime, y'all. So
Well, I'm impressed you said editors-in-chief and not editor-in-chiefs, because that's a common.
I would
mistake.
never say that. First, let me plug a couple upcoming events for you all. Next week, what day of the week is it? It's Wednesday. Where are we? Oh my God. I have no idea where we are. Oh, tomorrow
You're
is
at Manny's.
Manny's.
The place is named after you. You really should know where you are.
Tomorrow, I'm gonna see the Dune premiere. Anyone else seeing Dune tomorrow?
I thought we were going to the symphony tomorrow.
That's on Friday. But also, we're doing a super secret So Far Sound show, which I'm not supposed to talk about. Oh, we can talk about it. Oh, but it's sold out, bitch. Sorry. But next week, we have The Politics of Squid Game, which I'm so excited about. And then we are also doing, so we're part of this series that we're starting next week, where we're asking really tough questions that San Franciscans are thinking about. And we want to kind of show that we can have constructive civil dialogue around it. So on Tuesday, I'm interviewing the new director of behavioral health, Dr. Hillary Cunins, to talk about why is it so hard to get people who are sick on our streets the care that they need and off of our streets. So that's question number one. The second part of that is going to actually be on November 2nd, and it's going to be, should JFK Drive be close to cars? And it's going to have the museums, disability advocates, the Kids Save JFK people, the guy who runs the skating place. So that's going to be the third one. And the third one's actually going to be, should the school board be recalled? We're going to have the people who are running the recall and people who don't think the school board should be recalled.
You can have ambulances that.
No, we're not going to need them. We're not going to need them. And then there was one more event next week that I wanted to plug, but now I don't have it in front of me. Sorry, one more. Right, the CEO of Eventbrite is coming to talk about the future of gathering and events. She is an amazing CEO. It's a $1 billion company, tons of employees in the Bay, and she's had to run this ticketing company over the last 2 years of the pandemic. So Julia Hartz is going to be here on Thursday. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. Lots happening. And I just wanted to quickly let you know about how we're able to do all this, which is our individual sponsors. So Manny's is actually funded by the way we're funded is through a community of individuals who pay $36 or more per month to keep us afloat and allow us to do this kind of programming every night and pay our bills. And there's a QR code right there on that screen, very easy to use. If you want to join our community of sponsors, there's a lot of benefits, there's sponsor socials. And honestly, the sponsors, I did a little exercise with Precious today, our director of programming, and the sponsors literally kept this business open over the pandemic. The reason why we are here and able to have this fascinating conversation is because we are people funded and people powered. So really, really appreciate any of you considering joining us in that work. We'll send you a link in your email as well if you don't want to scan that. And the last thing I'll just say is, hi, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I wish you all a dry and warm way back home. So thank you so much. Subscribe to the Chronicle and read the Examiner.